What if the woman you trusted with your deepest secrets was secretly plotting to steal your life? For Amelia Sterling, her husband's brilliant assistant, Chloe, was a godsend, a helping hand during a difficult and lonely pregnancy. She brought her artisanal teas from the Mandarin Oriental, managed her overwhelming schedule, and listened for hours with a sympathetic ear. But as Amelia's belly grew, so did a dark, elaborate scheme nurtured in the shadows of their opulent New York penthouse. Chloe didn't just want a promotion. She wanted the wife's seat at the table, the Sterling name, the entire empire. And she was one whispered lie, one perfectly timed tear away from getting it all. Never suspecting that the quiet old woman in the corner, the powerful matriarch of the Sterling family, heard every venomous word. The silence in the Sterling penthouse was a specific kind of quiet. It wasn't peaceful. It was the heavy, sound-dampened hush of extreme wealth, where the thick pile of hand-knotted silk rugs, the sheer altitude of being 50 stories above Manhattan, and the weight of unspoken expectations swallowed every noise. For Amelia, this silence had become a breeding ground for anxiety. She sat curled on a sprawling sofa that had likely cost more than her parents' first home, a soft cashmere throw draped over her legs. Her hand rested protectively on the taut swell of her belly, where her son, their son, kicked with a restless energy she wished she possessed. 7 months. The journey had been fraught with complications, a bout of placenta previa gestational diabetes, and the ever-present bone-deep exhaustion that left her feeling like a ship lost in a fog. Her husband, Adrian Sterling, was a good man. He was kind, his love for her a steady if sometimes distant star. But he was a man forged in the crucible of corporate warfare. The CEO of Sterling Holdings, a real estate empire that devoured his time and energy with a relentless appetite. He would come home late smelling of expensive cologne and the metallic tang of the city kiss her forehead, ask about her day in a voice already half asleep, and collapse into bed. He loved her, she knew. But he wasn't here. Not really. Into this void stepped Chloe. Chloe Dubois was Adrian's executive assistant, a woman so perfectly assembled she seemed almost scientifically engineered for success. With hair the color of dark honey, eyes a startling shade of blue, and a mind that moved with the speed and precision of a supercomputer, she was indispensable to Adrian. And over the past few months, she had made herself indispensable to Amelia, too. "I brought you that new blend from the Mandarin Oriental," Chloe would say, her voice a soothing melody, as she entered the apartment, always looking impeccable in a Tom Ford sheath dress. "It's a white peony tea with hints of rosehip, supposed to be wonderful for third trimester fatigue." She would arrange the tea service on the marble coffee table, her movements fluid and sure. She'd listen as Amelia confessed her fears about childbirth, her anxieties about motherhood, her loneliness. Chloe would nod her expression, a mask of perfect empathy. "Adrian is just so consumed by the new Hudson Yards project." Chloe would offer a subtle defense that also served to highlight his absence. "He feels terrible he can't be here more. He told me just yesterday, 'Chloe, I don't know what I'd do without you keeping things running for Amelia.'" Amelia would soak it in a pang of gratitude, mixing with a faint, unplaceable unease. She was grateful for the help for the company. But sometimes when Chloe's gaze lingered a moment too long on a family portrait, or when she answered a question about Adrian's schedule with an intimacy that felt almost proprietary, a tiny alarm bell would sound in the back of Amelia's mind. She always silenced it. It was the hormones, she told herself, the paranoia of a high-risk pregnancy. Chloe was a friend. She was a lifesaver. Today, however, the alarm bell was ringing a little louder. Chloe was organizing the baby shower, an extravagant affair Amelia had wanted to be a simple brunch, but which had, under Chloe's enthusiastic guidance, morphed into a full-scale production. "I've confirmed the floral arrangements from Belle Fleur," Chloe said, tapping away on her iPad, her back to Amelia. "And the caterers have the final menu. I took the liberty of adding the miniature croque-monsieurs that Adrian loves so much. I thought it would be a nice touch, a way to make him feel included, even if he's only there for an hour." "That's Overhears." "Thoughtful, Chloe." Amelia murmured, her tea growing cold. It was thoughtful. So why did it feel like a calculated move in a game she didn't understand? The final piece of their domestic puzzle had arrived a week ago. Beatrice Sterling, Adrian's mother, the Dowager Queen, as some of the society papers called her. Beatrice was a woman carved from old-world granite, her posture impeccable, her silver hair styled in a flawless chignon. She moved through the penthouse with a quiet authority, her presence a silent judgment on the modern minimalist decor Adrian had chosen. She spoke little, her observations filtered through shrewd, assessing eyes. Beatrice had announced she was staying until the baby was born, a declaration, not a request. Her official reason was to support Amelia. Her unofficial reason, Amelia suspected, was to ensure the Sterling heir was brought into the world with the appropriate degree of order and propriety. She sat now in a wing-back chair across the room, ostensibly reading a biography of Catherine the Great. But Amelia could feel her mother-in-law's attention like a physical touch. Beatrice did not like Chloe. She had never said a word, but her civility was so brittle it was an insult in itself. When Chloe spoke, Beatrice's eyes would become flat and opaque. When Chloe offered her tea, she would politely decline. "Amelia, darling," Chloe said, turning around, her face aglow with a manufactured warmth. "I was thinking about the nursery, that antique silver rattle we saw at Harrods online. I know it's extravagant, but it would be a perfect family heirloom, don't you think?" "It is lovely," Amelia agreed, feeling a fresh wave of fatigue. She didn't want a Harrods rattle. She wanted her husband to come home before 10 p.m. She wanted to feel like this was her home, her baby, her life. "I'll have it messengered over," Chloe declared, making a note. "Consider it a little gift from me." From across the room, a page in Beatrice's book turned with a sound like cracking ice. The old woman's gaze lifted, settling on Chloe's back for a fleeting second. Her expression was unreadable, but in the depths of her cool grey eyes, a storm was gathering. She had seen women like Chloe before. Women with bright, hungry eyes and perfectly manicured hands that were expert at climbing. And she knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that Chloe wasn't just climbing the corporate ladder. She was trying to climb into her son's bed and into his wife's shoes. The silence in the penthouse was about to be broken. The days leading up to the baby shower became Chloe's masterpiece of subtle sabotage. She operated not with a sledgehammer, but with the delicate, poisoned needle of a master manipulator. Her goal was twofold: to isolate Amelia emotionally, and to reframe her in Adrian's eyes from a beloved wife into an unstable hormonal burden. It began with the flowers. Amelia had mentioned offhandedly that she loved the simple beauty of white hydrangeas. Chloe, in her capacity as the shower planner, filled the apartment with them. They were everywhere, great billowing clouds of white on every surface. "A little surprise," Chloe announced cheerfully, "to brighten your day." That evening, when Adrian came home, he sneezed. "God, the pollen," he muttered, rubbing his eyes. "What is all this? They're hydrangeas." Amelia said, her voice small. "I like them. "There are 1,000,000 of them, Ames," he said, not unmindultulla, but with an edge of irritation. "My allergies are going crazy." He disappeared into the master bathroom, and the sound of the shower was a wall between them. The next morning, Chloe arrived early. "Oh my goodness," she said, her hand flying to her mouth in performative horror. "Adrian's allergies I completely forgot. He mentioned it once years ago." "Oh, Amelia, I'm so sorry. I should have asked. You must think I'm so thoughtless." "It's fine," Amelia mumbled, but the damage was done. Chloe had created a problem, blamed herself to appear innocent, and in the process reinforced the idea that she, not Amelia, was the one who remembered the small, intimate details about Adrian. The serpent's whispers grew more venomous. Chloe began to confide in Amelia, a twisted form of intimacy that was actually psychological warfare. "I hate to even say this," Chloe began one afternoon, settling onto the ottoman at Amelia's feet, her expression a perfect portrait of concern. "But I'm worried about Adrian. He seems so distant lately. He snapped at me in a meeting today. It was nothing really, I have a thick skin, but it wasn't like him. The pressure of this deal and everything else must be immense. Please don't worry, though. I'm handling as much as I can for him." The implication was clear. Everything else was Amelia and the baby. The seed was planted. When Adrian was distant that evening, Amelia didn't see a tired husband. She saw a man pulling away just as Chloe had predicted. Simultaneously, Chloe was painting a different picture for Adrian. She would catch him in the moments before he left the office, her voice low and confidential. "Just a heads up, Adrian," she'd say, her hand briefly touching his arm. Amelia had a bit of a rough day. She was crying this afternoon, something about the color of the nursery wallpaper. "She's feeling very overwhelmed. I told her you were under incredible stress and to not take it personally if you were a little quiet tonight." I tried to reassure her. So when Adrian came home to a withdrawn Amelia, he didn't see a lonely pregnant woman craving connection. He saw the fragile, weepy creature Chloe had described. He became cautious, tiptoeing around her, his attempts to be gentle only widening the chasm between them. Communication already strained, fractured completely. Beatrice watched it all. She saw the way Chloe's gifts for Amelia were always subtly wrong, a rich pastry that would spike her gestational diabetes, a scented candle too strong for her heightened sense of smell. She saw the way Chloe would subtly rearrange things in the apartment, moving Adrian's reading glasses from the shared living room to his private study. A small act of claiming territory. One afternoon, Beatrice was in the library, a room Amelia rarely used when Chloe entered with a stack of mail. Believing herself to be alone, Chloe's professional mask slipped. She walked over to Adrian's large mahogany desk, her movements slow and sensuous. She ran a hand over the back of his leather chair, her fingers tracing the indentation where his head would rest. She picked up a framed photo of Adrian and Amelia from their wedding day. She stared at it for a long moment, but her gaze was fixed only on Adrian. A strange, hungry expression crossed her face, an unsettling mix of adoration and avarice. Then, with a faint, contemptuous smile, she placed the photo face down on the desk before quickly righting it as she heard a floorboard creak. Beatrice remained perfectly still behind a towering shelf of books, her heart turning to a cold, hard stone. This was no mere assistant. This was a predator. Amelia's own suspicions, long suppressed, were beginning to surface. One evening, Chloe stayed late to finalize details for the shower. As she was leaving, her phone, lying on the kitchen island, lit up with a notification. It was a text message. Amelia glanced over and her blood ran cold. The text was from a contact named A. The message read, "Can't stop thinking about last night. You're intoxicating." Amelia's breath hitched. Adrian. Her mind reeled. Last night, Adrian was home last night. He was in bed with me. Chloe snatched the phone up, her movements jerky. "My sister," she said a little too quickly, not meeting Amelia's eyes. "She's a drama queen." She offered a brittle laugh and practically fled the apartment. Amelia stood alone in the vast kitchen, the silence pressing in on her. Last night, Adrian had been there, but he'd been asleep when she came to bed. Or had he been? He often worked on his laptop after she drifted off. Her mind, already a fertile ground for anxiety, was now a whirlwind of doubt and fear. She wanted to confront him, to scream at him. But Chloe's conditioning had worked its magic. A voice in her head, a voice that sounded remarkably like Chloe's, whispered, "You're being hormonal, paranoid. You'll just push him away." She said nothing. She carried the poison of her suspicion into her bedroom and lay beside her husband, feeling like a stranger. Beatrice, sensing the shift in Amelia's demeanor, knew the time for passive observation was over. She had to talk to her son. She found him in his study, nursing a glass of scotch. "Adrian," she began, her voice even, "we need to talk about Chloe." Adrian sighed, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "Mother, please." "Not you too. Chloe is a godsend. She's holding everything together while Amelia is unwell. I don't know how we'd manage without her. You're from a different generation. You don't understand these modern working relationships." "I understand people, Adrian," Beatrice said, her voice sharp. "And that woman does not have your best interests at heart. She is creating discord between you and your wife." "She's supporting my wife," Adrian countered, his voice rising. "Amelia is the one who is emotional and irrational right now. Chloe is the only one who seems to understand what I'm going through." The words hung in the air, ugly and raw. Beatrice looked at her son, at the weary lines around his eyes, and saw not a powerful CEO but a fool being expertly played. He was blind. He wouldn't listen to her warnings. She left the study, her resolve hardening into something sharp and dangerous. If her son was a fool, she would have to be the one to open his eyes, and she would need more than just intuition. She would need irrefutable proof. She returned to her room, closed the door, and made a phone call to a man she hadn't spoken to in years, a private investigator, the best in the business. The time for subtlety was over. The hunt had begun. Chloe's campaign of psychological warfare intensified. Her next move was an act of audacious, calculated cruelty designed to humiliate Amelia and cement her reputation as incompetent in the eyes of the Sterling family's powerful social circle. Amelia was the honorary chair of the annual Blooms for Babies charity gala, a position she had inherited from Beatrice. It was her one remaining connection to a life outside the suffocating luxury of the penthouse. The event was weeks away, but the seating chart for the top-tier donors was a complex and delicate puzzle. Amelia had spent days working on it, carefully balancing corporate rivalries and social alliances. The finalized chart, a multi-page document annotated with her neat handwriting, lay on the dining room table. Chloe, of course, offered to help by having the chart professionally calligraphed. "It will be my contribution, Amelia," she said with a brilliant smile. "One less thing for you to worry about." Reluctantly, Amelia agreed. 2 days later, Chloe returned the chart, now a beautiful piece of art on thick cardstock. That evening, just as Adrian was walking in the door, Chloe, who was ostensibly there to drop off the chart, was helping Amelia with a glass of cranberry juice. With a theatrical gasp and a clumsy stumble that was anything but Chloe's arm, knocked the full glass of dark red juice directly onto the pristine seating chart. The dark stain bled across the calligraphy, obliterating names and turning the meticulous plan into a useless, soggy mess. "Oh my God, Amelia, I am so sorry," Chloe cried, dabbing at the mess with a napkin, only making it worse. "I'm so clumsy. This is a disaster. The gala committee needed this by tomorrow morning." Amelia stared speechless, the blood draining from her face. Adrian, walking in on the scene, saw exactly what Chloe had intended him to see: a frantic, flustered assistant and his wife standing over a ruined project. "What the hell happened?" he demanded. "It was my fault, Adrian. All my fault," Chloe said, tears welling in her eyes. "I spilled juice on the seating chart Amelia was working on." Amelia opened her mouth to protest. "I finished it days ago. You were just returning it." But Adrian spoke first, his voice sharp with frustration. "For God's sake, Amelia, this is the one thing you had to manage. The Blooms for Babies Gala is my mother's legacy. Now what are we going to do?" "I can fix it," Chloe interjected, her voice full of can-do spirit. "I have the original file on my laptop. I can stay up all night and recreate it. I remember most of the placements. Don't you worry, Adrian. I'll handle it." He looked from Chloe's determined, capable face to his wife's pale, shocked one. "Thank you, Chloe," he said, his relief palpable. "I don't know what we'd do without you." He shot Amelia a look of profound disappointment before turning and walking into his study, the door closing with a definitive click. Amelia was left standing in the wreckage, not of a seating chart, but of her husband's faith in her. Chloe's apology was a masterpiece of malice, a public declaration of Amelia's incompetence and her own indispensability. The isolation was now nearly complete. Amelia retreated further into herself. She felt a growing paranoia that felt anything but irrational. She started noticing things, the way a bottle of her prenatal vitamins seemed to be emptier than it should be, the way Chloe would casually ask about the security codes for the Hamptons estate. "Just in case Adrian needs me to send something out there." The breaking point came during a staged argument. Chloe, knowing Adrian was due home any minute, began a seemingly innocent conversation with Amelia about the baby's name. "I know you love the name Samuel," Chloe said gently, "but I happened to overhear Adrian on the phone with his father the other day. It seems Samuel was the name of a business rival who nearly ruined his grandfather. He said it would bring back terrible memories. He was probably afraid to tell you and upset you." Amelia, who had cherished the name for months, felt a fresh stab of pain. It was another secret, another thing Adrian had shared with Chloe, but not with her. "Why wouldn't he just tell me?" Amelia asked, her voice trembling with unshed tears. "He wants to protect you," Chloe soothed. "He's trying so hard." At that exact moment, the penthouse door opened. Adrian walked in to see his wife's tear-streaked face. "What now?" he asked, his voice weary. Before Amelia could speak, Chloe turned to him, her own eyes glistening. "She's upset about the name Samuel. Adrian, I think you have to tell her the truth about your grandfather." Amelia stared at Chloe, horrified. Chloe had manufactured this entire confrontation. "What are you talking about?" Adrian asked, looking genuinely confused. "What about my grandfather?" "The business rival, Samuel." Chloe prompted, her confident facade faltering for the first time. Adrian shook his head. "My grandfather's rival was named Morris. I have no idea what you're talking about. I love the name Samuel." The air went still. Chloe's face paled. She had overplayed her hand, inventing a lie so specific it was easily disproven. Amelia looked from Chloe's panicked expression to her husband's bewildered one, and for the first time in months, the fog of manipulation began to clear. It wasn't hormones. It wasn't paranoia. It was real. This woman was actively trying to destroy her marriage. "You," Amelia whispered, her voice low and shaking with a nascent rage. "You made that up." Chloe quickly recovered, forcing a laugh. "Oh my God, I must have completely misheard him. Morris, Samuel, all those old names, with everything going on. My mind is a sieve. I am so sorry for the confusion." She turned to Adrian. "See what I mean? The stress is getting to all of us." But the seed of doubt once planted in Amelia's mind had now been transplanted to Adrian's. He looked at Chloe, really looked at her, and saw not a helpful assistant, but a woman who had just lied bizarrely and point-blank about his own family history. He didn't understand it, but it was a crack in the perfect image he had held of her. Meanwhile, Beatrice was receiving the first report from her private investigator, a man named Costello, whose nondescript appearance belied a ruthless talent for unearthing secrets. The preliminary findings were damning. Chloe Dubois had a pattern. 2 previous employers, both wealthy, powerful, and married, had divorced their wives within a year of hiring Chloe. In both cases, Chloe had briefly dated the men before receiving a substantial severance and moving on. She wasn't a home wrecker in the traditional sense. She was a corporate raider of families engineering a crisis and then cashing out on the ensuing chaos. But Costello had found something more. Chloe wasn't just an opportunist. She had a deep personal connection to the world of wealth she so desperately wanted to inhabit. Her mother had been a housekeeper for a wealthy family in Greenwich, Connecticut, and had been summarily fired after being accused of theft. Chloe, then a teenager, had been humiliated. It wasn't just about money. It was about revenge. She wasn't just trying to conquer the Sterling family. She was trying to vanquish the ghosts of her own past. Beatrice read the report, her expression grim. The lies, the manipulations, it all clicked into place. Chloe wasn't just trying to replace Amelia. She was trying to become a better version of the women she felt had scorned her and her mother. Beatrice knew she couldn't just present this information to Adrian. He was defensive, and Chloe was an expert at spinning tales. No, she needed to catch the serpent in the act. She needed to stage an audience and the perfect moment for the truth to strike with the force of a thunderclap. And she knew just the occasion. The family dinner she had scheduled for the following evening. It was meant to be a quiet affair before the chaos of the baby shower. Now it would be a tribunal. The night of the dinner party, the air in the Sterling penthouse was electric with unspoken conflict. It wasn't a party. It was a battlefield, meticulously set for a final, decisive engagement. Beatrice had insisted on it being an intimate affair, just the 4 of them. Adrian, Amelia, Beatrice, and at Beatrice's pointed suggestion, Chloe. We must thank her for all her hard work on the gala seating chart. Beatrice had said, her voice smooth as silk. Adrian, still unsettled by the Samuel incident, but not yet fully comprehending the deception, had readily agreed. Chloe's invitation was to him a deserved honor. To Chloe, it was her coronation. To Amelia and Beatrice, it was a trap. Amelia felt a strange, cold calm settle over her. The revelation about the fabricated story had been a clarifying fire burning away her fear and self-doubt. She now saw Chloe's every move, every solicitous smile and concerned glance for what it was, a tactic. She sat at the magnificent rosewood dining table, wearing a simple navy blue dress that accentuated her pregnant form. Feeling not like a victim, but like a survivor awaiting the tide to turn. Chloe was a vision in blood-red silk. She radiated a triumphant energy, believing this dinner was the culmination of her efforts, a formal acknowledgement of her new indispensable role in the family. She had brought a bottle of Chateau Margaux, a pointedly expensive vintage she knew was Adrian's favorite. "A little something to celebrate," she'd said, handing it not to the housekeeper, but directly to Adrian, her fingers brushing his. The meal began a tense charade of civility. The clinking of sterling silver against fine china was jarringly loud in the quiet room. Chloe dominated the conversation, recounting anecdotes from the office that highlighted her competence and her intimate understanding of Adrian's world. She spoke of billion-dollar deals and corporate strategy, a language that subtly excluded Amelia. Adrian, caught in the middle, played the gracious host, attempting to bridge the palpable divide between the women. He directed questions to Amelia about the baby, but her answers were quiet and reserved. He complimented his mother's choice of caterer, but she merely inclined her head in acknowledgement. He was a man on a rapidly thinning patch of ice, sensing the cracks spreading beneath him, but refusing to look down. Emboldened by 2 glasses of the Margaux and her perceived success, Chloe began to overplay her hand. The conversation turned to the future, to the impending arrival of the sterling heir. "This penthouse is wonderful, of course," Chloe mused, gesturing vaguely with her wine glass. "But once the baby comes, you'll need more space, and perhaps a more traditional aesthetic. I saw a magnificent townhouse on the Upper East Side, a classic 6 with wonderful bones. It would be a true family home." Amelia's fork froze halfway to her mouth. Chloe was redecorating her life, planning a future that didn't include her. Adrian shifted uncomfortably. "We're very happy here, Chloe." "Of course," Chloe backpedaled smoothly. "Just thinking ahead. A strong family needs strong foundations." Her eyes met Beatrice's across the table, a flicker of a challenge in their blue depths. This was the moment Beatrice had been waiting for. She placed her napkin on the table. "Chloe, you are so very thoughtful," she said, her voice dangerously pleasant. "Speaking of foundations, I was just reviewing some old family trust documents in the library. My eyes aren't what they used to be. Would you be a dear and help me with some of the finer print?" Chloe preened. To be consulted on family trusts by the matriarch herself. This was the ultimate acceptance. "It would be my absolute honor, Beatrice," she said, rising from her chair. Adrian, relieved at the change in subject, had his phone buzz. "Excuse me for a moment," he said, looking at the screen. "It's the Tokyo office. I have to take this." He stood up and moved towards the large windows overlooking the glittering city, his back to the room. Beatrice led Chloe from the dining room into the adjoining library. The room was dark, panelled in rich walnut and smelling of old leather and paper. The only light came from a single green-shaded lamp on Adrian's desk. It created an intimate, conspiratorial atmosphere. Beatrice did not turn on any other lights. She walked towards a shelf, feigning a search for a document. "It is such a relief to have a woman of your capabilities around." Beatrice began, her back still to Chloe. "Adrian is a brilliant man, but he can be so blind when it comes to emotional matters." Chloe, seeing an ally in the formidable old woman, felt a surge of adrenaline. The final piece of her plan was falling into place. She would win over the mother, and the kingdom would be hers. "I do my best," Chloe said, her voice dropping to a confidential murmur. "I worry about him. And Amelia. This pregnancy has been so difficult for her. She's just not the vibrant, strong woman he married anymore. He needs a partner who can stand with him, not someone he has to constantly care for." "My sentiment exactly," Beatrice said, turning slowly. Her face was half in shadow, her expression unreadable. A man like Adrian, a man who will one day control the entire Sterling legacy, needs a true partner, a powerhouse. Chloe's heart hammered in her chest. This was it. She let the mask of the caring assistant fall away, completely revealing the raw, naked ambition beneath. That's all I've ever wanted to be for him, she confessed, her voice thick with a twisted sincerity. I can support him in a way she never could. I understand his business, his pressures. I can be his partner in the boardroom and in the bedroom. I can give him more children, strong children to carry on the Sterling name. She took a step closer, her voice dropping to a whisper, delivering what she believed would be the final checkmate move. And the truth is, Beatrice, Chloe said, a triumphant smile gracing her lips, I believe I'm already carrying his child. I'm pregnant. I was going to tell him tonight. Amelia's baby will have a brother or sister. Our family will be complete. She stood in the dim light of the library, glowing with her victory, confessing her entire treacherous plot to the one person she thought was her ally. She didn't notice that the heavy library door was not quite latched, left open by just a crack. She didn't see the shadow by the window in the dining room go utterly still. Adrian, having finished his call, had turned back just in time to hear Chloe's final devastating confession. Every word, every venomous, triumphant whisper had carried across the silent penthouse and landed on him like a physical blow. The phone slipped from his numb fingers and clattered unheard onto the plush carpet. The face of the powerful CEO crumpled, replaced by the stunned, agonized expression of a man whose world had just been shattered by the two women he trusted most. The silence that followed Chloe's confession was absolute. For a horrifying second, the only sound in the library was the thumping of her own triumphant heart. She looked at Beatrice, expecting a conspiratorial smile, a nod of approval. Instead, she saw nothing. The old woman's face was a mask of cold, terrifying calm. "Is that so?" Beatrice said, her voice devoid of all emotion. It was the voice of a judge pronouncing a sentence. Before Chloe could process the chilling shift in tone, Beatrice turned and walked back towards the dining room. Puzzled and suddenly deeply uneasy, Chloe followed. They re-entered the dining room to a scene of frozen horror. Amelia was staring at the library door, her face pale, but her eyes blazing with a righteous fury. Adrian stood by the window, his back to them, his shoulders rigid. He turned around slowly, and the look on his face made Chloe's blood run cold. The affable, slightly oblivious man she had so expertly manipulated was gone. In his place was a stranger, his face a white-hot mask of betrayal and rage. "Adrian," Chloe began, her voice a weak imitation of its usual confidence. We were just talking." "I heard what you were talking about," Adrian said, his voice dangerously low. He took a step forward. Every single word. Chloe's mind raced, desperately searching for an escape route, a new lie to spin. She defaulted to her most practiced tactic, attack Amelia. "She's been poisoning you against me," Chloe shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at Amelia. "This is her doing. She's a manipulative, paranoid liar. She's been jealous of my relationship with you from the beginning." Adrian flinched, as if struck. The guilt of his own blindness, of how he had dismissed Amelia's fears and embraced Chloe's lies, washed over him, fueling his fury. "You will not speak to my wife," he snarled. "Your wife!" Chloe laughed, a high, hysterical sound. "That weak, pathetic creature. I did you a favor. I was making you stronger, and I am carrying your child, Adrian. your son or daughter. She placed a hand on her flat stomach, her last desperate gambit. Amelia rose from her chair, her movements slow and deliberate. She had been silent, absorbing the raw, unfiltered truth of Chloe's evil. But she was not the weak woman Chloe had painted her to be. "No, you're not," Amelia said, her voice ringing with newfound strength and clarity. "You're lying, just like you lied about the seating chart, just like you lied about the name Samuel, just like you have lied about everything." Chloe stared at her, momentarily stunned by this display of defiance. She turned back to Adrian, her eyes pleading. "Adrian, darling, don't listen to her. It's the hormones making her crazy." It was the wrong thing to say. It was the phrase she had used to poison him, and hearing it now, knowing the truth, was like swallowing acid. But it was Beatrice who delivered the final devastating blow. She had stood by a silent, regal observer, watching the trap she had set spring with brutal efficiency. Now she moved. She walked not to Adrian, not to Amelia, but to the center of the magnificently set dining table. The table was a symbol of everything Chloe craved, the legacy, the stability, the power of the Sterling family. It was laden with fine, crystal-gleaming silver and the remains of an expensive meal. "You speak of strength," Beatrice said, her voice cutting through the tension like a shard of glass. "You speak of family. You know nothing of either." She methodically recounted every one of Chloe's deceptions she had witnessed. "You bought hydrangeas, knowing my son was allergic to create a rift. You spilled juice on a chart Amelia had already completed to make her look incompetent. You moved my son's belongings to establish a sense of intimacy that was not yours to claim. You have preyed on my daughter's vulnerability and my son's blindness. You are not a builder of families. You are a parasite." Chloe opened her mouth to protest, to spit more venom, but Beatrice held up a hand, silencing her. "And you are not pregnant," Beatrice said, her voice dropping to a low, cold tone. "You have never been pregnant." She pulled a thin file from the pocket of her dress, the file from Costello, the private investigator. "I took the liberty of having your background checked, Miss Dubois," Beatrice continued. "A history of targeting wealthy men, 2 shattered marriages in your wake, and most recently, an online purchase from a novelty store in Ohio for a set of 3 realistic-looking positive pregnancy tests, delivered to your apartment last Tuesday." The color drained completely from Chloe's face. She was exposed, utterly and completely. She stared at Beatrice, her mind finally comprehending the scale of her miscalculation. She hadn't been seducing a weak old woman in the library. She had been confessing to her executioner. As the finality of her ruin washed over her, Chloe began to scream a torrent of vile insults, directed at them all, at Amelia's weakness, Adrian's stupidity, Beatrice's meddling. Beatrice listened, her expression unchanging. Then, with a sudden, shocking burst of primal force, she placed both her hands on the edge of the heavy rosewood table and shoved. It was an act of incredible raw power. The table flipped, a great groaning wave of wood crystal silver and food. Glasses shattered against the far wall. Dishes exploded on the marble floor. The expensive Chateau Margaux bled into the white silk rug like a mortal wound. The sound was a deafening roar, a cataclysm that ripped through the penthouse's suffocating silence. In the ensuing ringing quiet, amidst the complete and utter devastation of the room, Beatrice Sterling, matriarch and protector, stood tall, her eyes cold and fierce, locked onto Chloe's. "Get out of my house." Each word was a block of ice. It was not a request. It was an exorcism. Terrified, humiliated, and utterly broken, Chloe Dubois turned and fled, stumbling through the wreckage of her ambitions and out of their lives forever. The echo of the crashing table seemed to hang in the air long after the sound itself had died. The penthouse, usually a sanctuary of pristine order, was now a scene of utter devastation. Shards of Waterford crystal glittered like malevolent diamonds, scattered across the floor. A river of dark, expensive wine soaked into the cream-colored silk rug, a wound in the very heart of the home. The scent of spilled food, wine, and something metallic. The smell of rage filled the opulent space. In the center of it all stood the three Sterlings, a shaken trinity amidst the wreckage. Maria, the family's long-serving housekeeper, appeared in the doorway, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes wide with a shock that bordered on terror. She saw the carnage, the shattered remnants of a life of luxury, and her gaze fell on her employers, expecting to see a similar chaos in them. But she didn't. Amelia was the first to move. A single tear traced a path down her cheek, but it was followed by a deep, shuddering breath of pure, unadulterated relief. It was the exhale she had been holding for months. Adrian, galvanized by that sound, rushed to her side. He didn't just hold her. He enveloped her, trying to physically shield her from the fallout of his own catastrophic blindness. "Amelia," he breathed, his voice raw with a guilt that was a physical agony. "My God, look at what I let happen. What I let her do to you. To us." He pulled back his hands, framing her face, forcing himself to meet her gaze. "I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for every time I came home late and didn't see the fear in your eyes. I'm sorry for the night I got angry about the hydrangeas. I'm sorry I believed you were just being hormonal. I'm sorry I let her poison my mind against you. I was a fool. A proud, arrogant fool, and my pride nearly cost me everything." He expected recrimination, anger, the bitter sting of an "I told you so." But the woman before him was not the fragile creature he had patronized. Her eyes, though tear-filled, were clear and steady. The true twist of the night wasn't the table flip. It was the revelation of his wife's hidden fortitude. "I knew Adrian," she said, her voice quiet but resonant in the broken room. "Well, I suspected. Deeply. For weeks." He stared, utterly bewildered. "What, Amelia? Why didn't you scream at me? Why did you let me be such an idiot?" A sad smile touched her lips. "Because I was scared," she confessed, her honesty brutal and clean. "I overheard a snippet of a phone call a month ago. The way she talked about you. It was possessive. Then I started watching. I saw how she'd subtly undermine me, how she'd find ways to be the hero while making me look helpless. I knew she was lying, but her lies were woven so perfectly into my own insecurities. She was a master at it." She took another breath, gathering strength. "I was terrified that if I launched an attack, a big, messy confrontation, you wouldn't believe me. She had laid the groundwork so perfectly to paint me as an unstable, pregnant mess. It would have been my word against hers. And at the time, I think you would have chosen to believe the one who made your life easier. The stress of that fight, of trying to convince my own husband that he was being deceived. I was terrified it would harm our son. So I decided to endure. I played my own game. I waited, and I watched, and I prayed she would make a mistake so enormous, so undeniable that even you wouldn't be able to look away." The weight of her words settled on Adrian, crushing him with the full understanding of her sacrifice. She had been fighting a war on her own, in silence, not just against Chloe, but against him against his obliviousness, his dismissal. He had been an obstacle, not an ally. His love for her, once a comfortable, assured fact of his life, now felt like something he had to earn back, a precious, fragile thing he had nearly thrown away. He turned his gaze to his mother. Beatrice stood with the regal posture of a general, surveying a victorious but costly battlefield. She gave a calm, dismissive wave to the horrified housekeeper. "It's all right, Maria," she said, her voice perfectly level. "A slight disagreement. We will handle the cleanup. Please take the rest of the night off." Maria, looking immensely relieved to be excused from the emotional war zone, nodded and disappeared. Beatrice then walked over to the library entrance, her heels crunching softly on broken porcelain. She retrieved the thin manila file from where she had left it on a side table. She held it out to Adrian. "You should read this," she said. "I hired a man named Costello 3 weeks ago. My instincts told me something was deeply wrong, but in this world, instincts are not enough. One needs evidence." Adrian took the file with a trembling hand. He opened it, and his eyes scanned the first page. He saw the names of Chloe's previous employers, the timelines of their divorces, the large financial settlements. He saw the report on her childhood, the deep-seated resentment that fueled her ambition. Then he saw the last entry, the one his mother had quoted, a receipt from an online store for hyper-realistic positive pregnancy gag test. He looked at his mother, a new profound respect dawning in his eyes. He had seen her as a relic of a bygone era, a society matriarch concerned with appearances. He had failed to see the shrewd protective strategist who saw threats long before he did and moved to neutralize them with cold, calculated precision. He didn't need to speak. He closed the distance between them and wrapped his arms around her small, iron-willed frame. "Thank you," he murmured against her silver hair. Beatrice patted his back, a rare, soft gesture. "I protect what is mine, Adrian," she said, her voice low and fierce. "Your father built an empire of steel and glass, but he always told me that the true foundation was family. You do not let termites infest the foundation. You exterminate them. That is the sterling standard." In the weeks that followed, a quiet revolution took place within the Sterling penthouse. The physical wreckage was cleared away in a day, but the emotional debris took longer to sweep clean. Adrian initiated a brutal restructuring of his life. He cancelled 2 multi-million-dollar deals that required extensive travel, delegating them with a trust he had never before shown in his subordinates. He fired not just Chloe, but 3 other senior staff members whose loyalty he now questioned, valuing character over ruthless efficiency. His days were no longer spent in boardrooms until midnight. They were spent with Amelia. They sat for hours, sometimes talking, sometimes in a comfortable silence that was more healing than words. He learned for the first time about the true depths of her loneliness. She learned about the crushing weight of legacy he carried. They unraveled the knots of deceit Chloe had tied around their marriage, and in their place they wove a new tapestry based on a radical, painful honesty. 2 months later, Samuel Adrian Sterling was born, his arrival heralding the true end of the siege. He was a healthy, beautiful baby with a thatch of his father's dark hair, and as Amelia tearfully pointed out, his grandmother's watchful, intelligent eyes. The final scene of the war was one of absolute peace. Months had passed. The city lights of a crisp autumn evening glittered outside the panoramic windows. Adrian sat on the sofa no longer in a bespoke suit, but in a soft grey sweater, their son asleep on his chest, a tiny hand curled around his finger. Amelia was curled against his side, her head resting on his shoulder, a novel lying open but forgotten in her lap. She was simply watching her husband and son, her face a portrait of contentment. Across the room, Beatrice sat in her customary wing-back chair, the blue baby blanket she had been knitting now draped over the sleeping infant. She wasn't knitting anymore. She was just watching her family that had been threatened, that had bent but had not broken. Adrian caught her eye and gave a small, grateful nod. She returned it with a faint, rare smile. The silence in the penthouse was no longer heavy or suffocating. It was light. It was warm. It was the sound of a hard-won peace, the unassailable strength of a family reforged in fire, protected by a mother's iron will, and secured by a love that had proven itself stronger than any lie. And so the Sterling Empire was saved not by a ruthless businessman, but by the quiet strength of a wife who refused to be a victim, and a mother who refused to see her family crumble. Amelia and Adrian, their love forged anew in the fires of betrayal, welcomed their son into a home finally free of deceit. Chloe's ambition led to her spectacular downfall, a cautionary tale whispered in the elite circles she so desperately wanted to conquer. What did you think of Beatrice's epic takedown? Do you believe a person's true character always reveals itself in the end? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. If you love stories of justice, drama, and powerful women, please give this video a huge thumbs up. Share it with someone who needs a dose of drama. And most importantly, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss another story. Thank you for watching.